The boardroom was already empty by the time I realized I had been betrayed. My son walked out with my legacy in his pocket, and I sat there alone, staring at the chair that used to be mine. I built Whitestone Systems from nothing. No capital, no connections, just an idea that I clung to like a life raft when the banks laughed at me and friends warned me to be realistic. I gave it 43 years of my life, missed birthdays, anniversaries, even the day my wife was rushed to the hospital because we were launching our IPO. I had sacrificed everything for that company. And now, my son, Daniel, had swept it out from under me with the precision of a trained assassin. He was my only child. I raised him on the factory floor. When he was 8, he watched me out-negotiate a supplier twice my size. When he was 10, I let him sit in on engineering meetings, even though the others laughed. When he was 16, I handed him the keys to our first automated lab, told him, "One day this will all be yours." But I never thought he'd take it before I was ready to give it. The plan was simple. Step down at 80. Not before. Train Daniel slowly. Let him inherit the culture, not just the numbers. But he was impatient. And I was blind. He used my trust like a tool. Convinced the board that I was too old to lead, too rigid, too emotional. That I was the past. He made it sound so professional, so inevitable. I wasn't even in the room when they voted. My own son didn't look me in the eye when he made his pitch. 2 weeks later, he stood behind my old desk, a smirk barely concealed under his corporate charm, and offered me a chairman emeritus title and a gold watch. I turned down both. What no one realized, not him, not the board, not the employees who now referred to me as Mr. Whitestone Sr., was that I hadn't lost everything. Not yet. I lived quiet for 3 months, watched from the sidelines while Daniel changed the company's direction. He laid off loyal engineers, cut research to boost short-term profits, and poured millions into PR campaigns and influencer partnerships. The stock went up. The media called him a genius. But behind the glass smiles and fast growth, I saw the cracks forming. He was gutting the soul of what I had built, and I was not going to let him burn it to the ground. The mistake Daniel made, one of many, was thinking I was just a tired old man without fight left in me. He didn't understand that when you've spent decades surviving recessions, lawsuits, betrayals, and the death of your own wife, there's very little in this world that can truly break you. And he didn't know I still owned the patent rights to our original operating framework. The legal team must have assumed I signed them over years ago. I didn't. I just never mentioned it again. Until now. I contacted Sarah Kim first. She was my head of engineering for 15 years, left the company after Daniel promoted a 28-year-old consultant over her. Brilliant woman, loyal to a fault. When she answered the phone and heard my voice, she started crying. "I thought you'd never call," she said. "I need your help. It's time we build something better." I reached out to other sold friends, ex-employees, partners I hadn't seen in a decade. People who still believed in integrity, in long games, in the quiet dignity of building something that mattered. I found them in garages, in retirement homes, in tiny startups swallowed by Daniel's aggressive acquisitions. They hadn't forgotten what we built, and they sure as hell hadn't forgiven how Daniel tore it apart. We called it Phoenix Initiative. Not a company. Not yet. Just a dream on paper. But it had everything Whitestone once stood for: research over marketing, ethics over hype, innovation over ego. And at its heart, the engine that powered Whitestone's original Success Me operating framework, which Daniel could no longer legally use once I pulled the licensing. I revoked it quietly, sent the termination notice through my personal attorney. He tried to fight it in arbitration. Lost. Suddenly, his company's flagship software became a legal liability. Investors panicked. The stock dipped. And I watched from the shadows as Daniel scrambled to salvage the mess. He called me 3 times. I didn't answer. He sent flowers. I returned them. Then, one night, he showed up at my door. He looked thinner. Not weak, but hollow. His expensive coat was soaked in rain. And for the first time in years, I saw not the executive he had become, but the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. "Dad," he said, voice shaking. "Why are you doing this?" I didn't invite him in. Just stood there, steady. "You took something from me. I was trying to protect the company. You weren't protecting anything. You were stealing it." He wiped his face. Rain or tears, I couldn't tell. "I didn't mean to. You meant to win. You always did." A long silence passed between us, the kind that fills decades of distance in a single breath. I'm sorry, he said, but if you take this from me, I have nothing left. That's not my fault, I replied. It's yours. He didn't argue, just nodded, turned around, and walked away. That was the last time I saw him in person. Over the next year, Phoenix grew. Quietly, steadily. Our new prototype outperformed Daniel's entire line. We didn't launch with noise. We launched with trust. Engineers came back. Investors trickled in. Word spread. I was back. Not for revenge. For redemption. Whitestone's systems eventually collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. Daniel stepped down. Disappeared from public view. I heard rumors she moved overseas, started a consultancy, maybe even got therapy. I don't know. I stopped checking. Because something strange happened as Phoenix thrived. I stopped caring about winning. What mattered was that I had rebuilt something beautiful, not out of spite, but out of belief. That even in the darkest betrayal, legacy can still be reclaimed not through force, but through vision. Not by holding on too tightly, but by letting go with grace. I used to think legacy was about what you left behind. Now I know it's about what you protect when the world tries to tear it away. Phoenix was no longer a plan. It was a movement. And somehow, I found myself surrounded by people who still remembered how to build with their hands, not just their spreadsheets. Sarah Kim worked 15-hour days with the fire of a college grad. She redesigned the engine we built 25 years ago with new AI architecture, more efficient, leaner, ethical by design. Michael Tran, my old logistics guy, came out of retirement to help us set up distribution. He brought his daughter, now a supply chain strategist at a major firm. They worked side by side, father and child, building something together in a way Daniel and I never could. Maybe that's what hurt the most. I thought about Daniel every day, even if I didn't say his name. I wondered if he watched the news, saw the quiet rise of Phoenix. I wondered if it stung, or if he had already buried that part of himself. Then, in the fall of that year, I got a letter. Not an email, not a legal envelope. A real letter, handwritten. Dad, I'm in Tokyo now. I needed space. Maybe more than space. I needed to become someone who doesn't need to win all the time. You were right. I took it. I saw the power and I took it. And for what? I thought I was proving something to you. Proving that I was finally the man you wanted me to be. But you didn't want a man who won. You wanted a man who built. I didn't get that until it was too late. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you know, I'm trying. I really am. Daniel. I sat with that letter in my lap for a long time. The kind of silence that only fathers know, the one between regret and understanding. That night, I went to the garage and opened a dusty old box marked 1996. Inside was a framed photo. Me, Daniel at 12, our first factory prototype behind us, both of us wearing oversized safety goggles, both of us smiling like we'd just built a spaceship. I kept that photo on my desk at Phoenix after that. No one asked. No one needed to. 6 months passed. Phoenix reached a point where we had to choose, stay boutique and mission-driven or scale. The board leaned toward growth. They wanted funding, exposure, big league distribution. We had suitors. Offers came in from legacy corporations, hungry for innovation. I sat through pitch after pitch, watched suits with rehearsed smiles promise they'd keep our values intact. I had heard it all before, and I knew how it ended. In one of those meetings, I found myself drifting. My eyes landed on the photo again. Young Daniel, hopeful, fearless, still dreaming. And I thought, what if legacy wasn't just about what I left behind or even what I rebuilt? What if it was about who I gave a second chance to? I made the call that same night. Daniel didn't pick up at first, but he called back. Dad, he said, confused. Is everything all right? No, I said, but it could be. He was silent. You still got something in you? I asked. He hesitated. I'm not the same man I was. Good. The last one was an idiot. He laughed, quietly. Yeah, he was. I've got a position. Temporary. Strategic advisor. You'd answer to Sarah. Not me. That's unexpected, he said. Why now? Because I believe in second chances. And because I need someone who's already made every mistake. He let out a breath I didn't know he'd been holding. I won't let you down again, he said. You will, I replied. Just do it honestly this time. The team was shocked. Some resisted. Others trusted me. Sarah was cold toward Daniel at first, but I saw something change after a few weeks of late nights and real effort. He didn't act like a CEO anymore. He asked questions, took notes, admitted when he was wrong. Once, during a heated meeting with our investors, he stepped back and let Sarah lead the conversation, something the old Daniel never would have done. Afterward, he told her, "You've got the voice this company needs. I'm just here to help it grow." She told me about it later, privately. Her voice cracked. "I didn't think people like that changed," she said. "They don't," I replied. "Not unless they lose everything that doesn't matter and find something that does." As Phoenix entered its second year, we launched our flagship platform, Orion, a new generation of ethical tech infrastructure, open source at its core. We gave away the base code to universities. We partnered with nonprofits to build sustainable systems for underserved communities. And within 6 months, Phoenix wasn't just profitable. It was meaningful. I gave a keynote at Stanford that spring, my last public appearance as acting CEO. Daniel introduced me. He didn't flatter me. He told the truth. About the mistakes. About the cost. About the blood and fire it took for a father and son to find their way back. When I stepped up to the podium, the applause was warm, but not deafening. I liked it that way. I didn't need to be the hero anymore. "I spent my life building one company," I said. "And when I lost it, I thought my story was over. But I learned something in the ashes, that power means nothing unless it's shared. And that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the final form of strength." When I stepped down a month later, I passed the reins to Sarah. Not Daniel. He didn't want them. He stayed on, by her side, mentoring the new generation. Quietly, humbly. Now, in the twilight of my life, I sit by the garden most mornings. My hands tremble more than they used to. But when I hold that old photo of Daniel and me at 12, I smile. Because we didn't just rebuild a company. We rebuilt each other. I didn't expect peace to feel so quiet. It crept in slowly, like the soft hum of wind through the trees on early spring mornings. I wasn't chasing milestones anymore. No new titles, no magazine covers, no boardroom triumphs. Just a chair, a warm mug, and the sound of something alive growing around me. Daniel started joining me in the garden every Saturday. He never asked, just showed up. Sometimes with fresh coffee, sometimes with nothing but silence. At first, we didn't speak much. I think he was afraid I'd bring up the past. I didn't. I just let time do what time does best, strip away the noise. One morning, as the light caught the edges of a young orange tree we'd planted together, he finally spoke. "I think I hated you," he said. I didn't flinch. "I know. I wanted to beat you. Not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't think I could ever be you. And I thought, if I could take it from you, maybe I'd feel enough." I stared out over the rows of seedlings. Did it work? "No," he said. "It made me feel like a fraud." He rubbed his face, raw honesty cracking through him like a broken mirror trying to fit its pieces back together. "I thought I had to prove I was strong. You were always so untouchable. You buried Mom and kept going. You got betrayed and built again. You walked into every room like the world owed you nothing, and yet it gave you everything." I turned to him, finally. "Daniel, I didn't walk through fire to be untouchable. I walked through it because I had no other choice. And most of the time, I was terrified. I just didn't show it." He looked at me like a boy again. "Why didn't you ever say that?" "Because I thought being a father meant being the wall, not the window. But I see now. Maybe I should have let you see the cracks." He nodded, slowly. Then he asked something I never thought I'd hear from him. "Do you ever regret making me your successor?" I let the question hang there. It deserved real thought. "No," I said at last. "But I regret not teaching you the why behind what we built. I taught you the mechanics. I should have taught you the soul." He lowered his head. "I didn't deserve it. Maybe not then, but you do now." A few weeks later, Daniel proposed something that caught me completely off guard. "Let's start a mentorship program," he said. "Not just for our team, but for kids like I used to be. Sons trying to live up to impossible fathers. Girls with no one telling them they can lead. Young people who think failure defines them." He looked at me, steady. "Let's build something that saves them before they make our mistakes." I stared at him, speechless for a moment. Then I smiled. Now that's the legacy I want. We launched the Phoenix Fellowship that summer. It wasn't flashy. No ads. No spotlights. Just outreach to community colleges, local youth centers, and underfunded high schools. We paired students with retired engineers, designers, operators, people with real scars, not just polished resumes. We taught them how to build, not just systems, but themselves. At the first orientation event, Daniel stood on stage, holding a microphone, face calm, but burning with intention. I used to think success was about climbing faster than everyone else, he told the room. But when I reached the top, I realized I was alone. Now I know success isn't about how high you climb. It's about how many people you lift with you. The room erupted in applause. I stood at the back, hidden in the shadow of the lights. Pride rose in me like a tide I couldn't hold back. Not because he finally lived up to my image of him, but because he no longer needed to. Later that fall, Sarah announced she'd be stepping down as CEO to spend more time with her newborn twins. She'd done enough, she said. Rebuilt enough. Led with more grace and fire than anyone we could have imagined. We gathered in the old lab for the announcement. She looked at me, then at Daniel. I'm recommending Daniel as my successor, she said, her voice sure. Not because of who his father is, but because of who he's become. The room was silent for a breath. Then, slowly, the team stood, one by one, applauding. Daniel's eyes watered. He didn't hide it this time. Afterward, he found me outside. I don't deserve this, he said. No one ever really does, I replied. We just try to be worth it. He asked me if I'd come back. Not as a boss, not even as an advisor. Just as my father, he said. I've always been your father, I said. But now, I think I can finally be your friend. He smiled. I'd like that. So we did. Every Sunday, we met at a diner down the street from the first factory we ever built. Same booth. Same black coffee. No business talk. Just life. We talked about books. About Mom. About who we were when we weren't building things. I told him stories I'd never told anyone about the first time I cried after a layoff. The time I nearly gave up. The night I thought maybe being a father was the one job I failed at. He listened. And in those quiet mornings, between clinking mugs and scattered laughter, something healed between us. Not the kind of healing that erases the past, but the kind that makes peace with it. On my 81st birthday, Daniel brought me a gift. It wasn't expensive. Just a framed quote, printed on clean parchment, with a line I had once said to him when he was a boy. Legacy isn't what you build alone. It's what you leave behind in others when you're gone. He smiled as I read it. I didn't understand it back then, he said. Neither did I replied. We didn't need to say more. Because we both knew this was the moment legacy became real. The year after Daniel took over as CEO, Phoenix became something I had never dared to dream of better than what Whitestone ever was. Not just profitable, not just respected, but trusted, rooted, human. Under Daniel's leadership, the fellowship expanded to 10 cities. We began receiving letters from students who said the program had changed their lives. One young woman, Jasmine Lee, wrote, I grew up thinking I wasn't meant for leadership. Then my mentor from Phoenix told me that power doesn't belong to those who demand it, it belongs to those who earn it. I want to be like her one day. I want to give someone else what you gave me. I read that letter 3 times. Then I handed it to Daniel without a word. He didn't speak either, just folded the paper, gently, and tucked it into his jacket pocket like something sacred. That was when I knew he had finally understood. Leadership was never about authority. It was about stewardship. Around that same time, a publisher contacted me. They wanted to buy the rights to my life story. Said there was a market for redemption arcs. I turned them down. Not because I wasn't flattered, but because I wasn't interested in becoming a myth. I had already spent decades being seen as a monument. Now, I just wanted to be a man. So instead of a memoir, I started writing something else, a guide for the next generation. Not about success, about failure, about the beauty of beginning again. I called it The Second Climb. Daniel read the draft and asked if he could write the foreword. When I read what he submitted, I cried in my kitchen for the first time in 40 years. I spent most of my life trying to be the kind of man people respected. What I didn't realize was that I already had the blueprint. I just ignored it because it came with expectations I didn't think I could live up to. My father built something from nothing, not because he wanted power, but because he wanted to prove that integrity could win. I betrayed that once. He didn't close the door. He waited for me to knock again. This book isn't about business. It's about mercy, about what happens when we fail and are loved anyway. The book did well. Modestly, we donated every cent to the fellowship. But what mattered most wasn't the sales, it was the conversations that came after. Young leaders wrote in, asking how to rebuild after bad decisions. Parents emailed to say they had reopened communication with their estranged children. Old colleagues reached out, saying they'd finally let go of the bitterness they carried for years. Redemption, it seemed, was contagious. Not everything was easy. I had health scares. A minor stroke that left me temporarily speechless. A bout of pneumonia that Daniel insisted I take seriously, dragging me to the hospital himself like a stubborn son trying to earn back time he once threw away. "I'm not letting you die while we're finally getting it right," he said, voice trembling. "I'm not going anywhere," I told him, squeezing his hand. "Not until I see my grandchildren." He froze. I laughed. That wasn't a subtle hint. That was a direct order. To my surprise, he grinned. "Well," he said, "you might want to keep your calendar open this spring." 9 months later, my granddaughter was born. Her name is Margaret Elaine Whitestone. Maggie, for short, named after my wife. When they placed her in my arms, I felt the weight of 3 generations in a single breath. I had held my son once, this same way. Awkward, gentle, terrified. Now I held his child. And something inside me settled. Something that had been chasing legacy like a ghost finally understood it wasn't in the buildings. It wasn't in the patents. It wasn't even in the headlines. It was in this moment. In this tiny human life that would grow up never knowing the war I fought inside my heart. She would only know what we passed down to her. Love, courage, forgiveness, vision. Phoenix continued to grow. We expanded into global infrastructure projects, but kept our values close. No IPO, no flashy mergers. We remained privately held, employee-owned, values first. People called us the quiet giant. I like that. And in all the noise of the modern world, we never lost our center. We mentored. We built. We listened. We invested in people. Sometimes Daniel would walk into my study after a long day and ask, "Did I do okay today?" I'd look at him and say, "Better than okay." You remembered why it matters. One evening, while watching the sunset over the hills behind my house, Daniel joined me again, this time with Maggie asleep on his shoulder. He sat beside me, quiet, the sky turning orange and soft. "She won't remember me like this," he said, voice low. "She doesn't need to," I replied. "She'll remember who you be the way you raise her." He looked at me. "Do you think I'll do better than you did?" I smiled. "I hope you do. Because that's what legacy really isn't, being remembered perfectly, but being surpassed by someone you once carried on your shoulders." When I was younger, I thought the worst pain in life was failure. I was wrong. The worst pain is not being seen giving everything you have, only to be misunderstood by the people who matter most. It's the ache of building something for someone who doesn't yet know how to value it. And yet, it's also the cost of fatherhood. You love first. You build first. You give first. And you wait. You wait until the one who betrayed you learns how to return home, not as the child you raised, but as the person they chose to become. Daniel became that person. Not all at once, but piece by piece. I watched him grow through hard lessons and lonely nights. I watched him shoulder blame he could have deflected, repair bridges no one else thought worth saving, and speak truth in boardrooms that once rewarded charm over conviction. And then, one spring evening, he asked me a question that knocked the air out of my lungs. "Would you marry them?" I blinked. "Who?" He smiled shyly. "Maggie's mom and me." My mouth fell open. "You're getting married?" He nodded. "We want something small, quiet, but it wouldn't feel right unless you officiated." I stared at him for a long time. There was a time I thought I'd never hear words like that from him again. There was a time I thought we'd end as enemies, quiet and bitter in opposite corners of the world. But here he was, not asking for permission, asking for blessing. The wedding was held in the old Whitestone vineyard, the same one I bought for Elaine on our 20th anniversary. We hadn't been back in years. I thought it would hurt too much. It didn't. The vines were fuller now, the air richer. Maggie toddled down the aisle in her white lace shoes, giggling. The sun filtered through the trees like golden forgiveness. And I stood between the couple, holding a worn Bible that had belonged to Elaine's father. Daniel's eyes never left mine as I spoke. "This isn't just a vow," I said. "It's a choice. A promise to build, not with walls, but with windows. To open yourselves to the wind and the rain and still stand." He squeezed her hand, tears in his eyes. And in that moment, I saw not the boy I once feared would ruin everything, but the man who had fought, failed, and returned stronger. My son. Life slowed down after that. Not in the way people expect. I still woke up early. Still checked in on the teams. still gave feedback on proposals. But I let go of control. Phoenix was no longer mine to drive. It was Daniel's now, and Sarah's, and the hundreds of young leaders they were nurturing into greatness. I began spending my days mentoring quietly, one call at a time, one person at a time. Sometimes I'd walk into the workshop and see someone struggling, paralyzed by doubt. And I'd sit beside them, not to instruct but to listen. You'd be surprised how few people are truly listened to anymore. One day, a young man named Javier, one of our brightest fellows, asked me why I never retired completely. "Don't you ever just want to rest?" he asked. I smiled. This is rest. Doing something meaningful. Walking alongside people who still believe. He nodded. "You've got a different kind of energy. Like peace energy." That made me laugh harder than I had in weeks. Peace energy, I repeated. "I'll take that." One evening, Daniel and I were walking the edge of the vineyard again. Maggie had just turned 4. She had her mother's eyes and her grandfather's stubbornness. I adored her. "I'm thinking of turning the fellowship into a foundation," he said. "Something permanent, with funding that outlives us all." "That's a big step," I replied. "Yeah, I want to call it the Whitestone Foundation." I stopped walking. He looked at me. "Too much." I shook my head slowly. "No, just. I spent so many years trying to protect that name. And now, hearing you say it like that, it feels different. Like it belongs to more than just me." He nodded. "It does. It belongs to everyone you helped up from the ground." 3 months later, I had another health scare. This time, it was real. The doctors said I'd had a series of minor strokes. My memory was starting to fragment. There would be good days, bad ones. Eventually, things would blur. Daniel stayed beside me through every appointment. He didn't panic, didn't try to fix it, just held my hand when I forgot words. Brought me stories from the office when I was too tired to visit. On one particularly foggy afternoon, I looked at him and asked, "Did we win?" He leaned in close. "We didn't win," he said. "We built something that lasts." And that was better. Eventually, I stopped going into the office. My body began to slow, and so did my mind. But my heart was more alive than ever. The last time I stood before the whole Phoenix team, I told them this. "I once believed legacy was what you leave behind. But now I know it's what keeps going when you're no longer here to carry it. And I see it in your hands. In your hearts. You are my legacy. Every single one of you." There were tears. But no sadness. Only reverence. Only love. I spend most days in the garden now. Maggie runs between the roses and the lavender, her laughter floating through the air like music only God could compose. Daniel visits every weekend. Sometimes with his family. Sometimes alone, with silence and questions. And always we sit. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we don't. And every time he leaves, he hugs me like a man making peace with time. I don't know how much longer I have. No one really does. But when my time comes, I won't be afraid. Because I have seen the worst kind of fall and chosen to rise anyway. I have known the betrayal of blood and chosen to forgive. I have lost everything that once defined me and discovered who I really was underneath. And most of all, I have loved. Fully. Fiercely. Without apology. My son pushed me out of the company I founded. So I gave him something greater than power. I gave him a way back. And in return, he gave me what every father hopes for, but so few receive. Not obedience. Not perfection. But understanding. And in that understanding, he gave me back my name. Not as a brand. Not as a monument. But as a man.